thank you so much for being here on what is not the best of days for the Eisteddfod. I was here last year, exactly a year ago, and I got burnt to toast. I enjoyed the glorious sunshine, walking around the field. That was a year ago. Today, not quite the same, but you've made it here. Samantha's made it here, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's a real privilege to be here on stage with Samantha today to talk about her book, CP Isn't Me. Just before we begin, a few of my own words, because most of today is going to be Samantha's words, but a few of my own words. So I started my day in Rill this morning. It was lovely this morning. I sent some people in my family for a walk on the beach while I did some work, and I finished at 1 o'clock and I got in the car and the rain started. And if you look sort of behind you, what that sky looks like, that's quite nice now. It's looking a lot better than it was at 1 o'clock this afternoon. It took me ages to get back from Rill to Wrexham. The weather was absolutely incredible. Torrential rain, wind, thunder, lightning, everything the weather could throw at you. It was horrendous. I got back home, had some lunch, got in the car, and half drove, half sailed down to Llangollen to be here with Samantha today. I've had to repair my bumper because it got pulled off when I hit one of the floods too hard, but luckily I've got it back on the car, so lesson there for anybody hitting flood water. What's that got to do with me being here right now on stage with Samantha? Well, the thing is, tomorrow it'll probably be sunny again. I'll get in the car and I'll drive and everything will just be easy and it'll just be like it always is. Just get on with stuff, not even think twice. But for Samantha, life isn't like that. Samantha is battling, like we've had the weather today. This is a daily battle for Samantha. It's not a case for Samantha. She doesn't just wake up the next day, the sun's shining and everything's rosy. There's always another battle waiting around the corner. And whether that is like a thunderstorm like we had today or something else, it's such a different way to live. And I've only learnt that through the work I've done with Samantha over the last couple of years. And it has opened my eyes to how the world looks for others. And that is what this book was all about. And I believe that it's something Samantha has achieved, and achieved in a remarkable fashion. Those are my words. The rest of the words today are Samantha's words. I'm going to speak on Samantha's behalf, but please, please understand I'm speaking for Samantha in everything that we say from here on. So to introduce Samantha then, who is Samantha Maxwell? How did we come to this point today where she's on stage in the Llangollen International Eisteddfod? In Sam's words, my dad said for years that I really should write a book. I didn't take it seriously. I was always told by my English teacher too that I have a great imagination and writing ability. I think it was a case of I didn't really know if people would be interested in what I had to say. It was that belief in myself that I just didn't have. And now you're sat here on stage, right? Being physically disabled with a mild form of cerebral palsy caused a few issues, but not for the reasons you may think. It seems that society has an underlying issue with disability. I've been knocked back and talked down to for so long over something I can't control that I realised I needed to do something. My sister-in-law Kerry asked me to write a review for her class discussion about a book on CP. The response I received was overwhelmingly positive, so much so that it spurred me on to finally deciding to write something. I realised that it was an extremely cathartic process. After my mental health deteriorated, I just poured everything out that had been in my head for years, and I felt so much better and back in control. I feel like me again, and that's important. If this book helps others to understand the normality of disability or help disabled people feel empowered, then I'll be happy. I've dedicated this book to my lovely late Nan who supported me throughout my life. I hope I've made her proud. I think anybody sat here today in front of Samantha would agree that you have definitely made your Nan proud. You have absolutely done that I am sure of. So that's a little bit of context, sort of how we came to be here today with this book that Samantha has in her hands. Now, a while ago we did an interview together on the radio, and we looked at some questions from different people. So we're going to look at some of those questions now, and some of Samantha's answers. The first thing I ask Samantha, and I ask her every time I meet her in this kind of context, is tell me a little bit about yourself. As Sam says, I'm just an ordinary woman in my early 30s who just happens to have a mild form of cerebral palsy, which affects my mobility. Therefore, I use a wheelchair to get around. I live with my parents in Wrexham. And in that answer, something really, really important is the difference between having to use a wheelchair or being labelled by society as a wheelchair user. They are two very, very different things, and that's so important to take away from this book. I asked Samantha to tell me what her book was about. Ultimately, the book is about trying to raise awareness of disability, and in doing so, try to show people that disability is normal. Disabled people are normal. We should never be treated any differently from the next person. There's no difference between Samantha sat next to me here and me sat next to Samantha. There is no difference. We are both people. Disability does not have to have a bad rap in culture. The majority of the information is out there, but so much is negative. And, in my own personal opinion, fear-mongering. Disability is still seen as a monster that we should distance ourselves from. Whereas in reality, disability is a standard part of life. And I hope that argument comes across in the book. There's a big movement now. I've talked to Samantha about this, I've talked with other people. The very word disability begins with a negative prefix. Maybe as a society, we should start to challenge that negative prefix. There's some people have said differently abled should be considered as an alternative. We need to move away from this immediate negative portrayal of anybody who is seen as being other than able-bodied. I asked Samantha when did she get the first inspiration to write the book? And was there any particular experience that made her decide to write it? These are Sam's words. My dad initially was the person who said I should be writing, as he believed I had some sort of a gift for it. And what a great thing it is that he's here now, and that you followed his words and made this happen. And we owe him a lot, don't we, really? The thing is, though, I'd never had that self-belief that's needed. Definitely not back then. Even my English teacher said I had a good imagination, but I guess it was a combination of my age, I was a teenager then, and the fact that I was bullied in high school that ultimately made me feel doubtful. I thought that nobody would be interested in what I had to say, which in itself is dangerous, as it lends itself to self-sabotage and depression, both of which I developed. It was actually during the first lockdown that I decided to give it a go. I was asked by my sister-in-law Kerry, an English teacher, to write a review for her class of a book all about cerebral palsy. Any identifying themes with the protagonist I personally felt, or indeed lack of identifiable themes. As the responses were so overwhelmingly positive, I was inspired to try and see if I could write a book of my own. That, coupled with discrimination and judgment that I'd faced up to the time, I decided enough was enough. I decided to do it as a last-ditch attempt to save what little positivity I had at the time. And even since then, it's been a journey. I think Samantha would agree, it's been a journey. There are ups and downs. The world of being a writer is a rocky road. There are times when you feel abandoned and alone in the world of publishing. There are times when your publisher takes on too much work and loses track of time. I'll put my hands up to that. It's a difficult journey. It's a really difficult journey. And I think anybody who has ever written words, whether it's a book or a poem or a song, would recognise you always have those moments of self-doubt. Every time you put your words on a page, you're exposing a little bit of your soul. It's tough stuff. Samantha and I discussed the purpose of writing the book and the impact Samantha desired to make. And the answer is very simple. Samantha's aim was to try and break the stigma of disability, to put a stop to the negative side of the subject. I'm sick and tired of the constant negative press that is drip-fed into the minds of society. When I was actually doing research for the book, everything I came across was so negative. Disabled people cannot do this or that. We can't function as everyone else. We are less capable, and perhaps the most brutal, and Sam would say this for herself, the question of intelligence. Why is it, as a society, that for some reason we see somebody in a wheelchair and we immediately behave as if they are less intelligent than we are? Or we see somebody who, for whatever reason, can't articulate their words in quite the same way we can, and suddenly we judge their intelligence. I moved to Poland. I lived for 10 years in Poland. Now I can speak fluently to a lovely lady who I saw here earlier. But when I moved to Poland, I didn't speak any other language. And it's a terrible, terrible place to be when you cannot communicate with people. But not knowing a language is a choice. I can choose to learn that language or not. With disability, that choice is taken away from you. Samantha doesn't have that choice of how people react, but there should be. And the way we can create that choice is by educating people and informing them. Disability isn't negative. I can do things. I personally have an honours degree in graphic design. I have a graphic design job in the motorsport industry. I have my own little part-time graphic design business on Etsy, designing A4 posters. But because I'm in a wheelchair, which is a physical indicator of disability, people see that before they see me. Do you know the other problem with a wheelchair is that by nature, people look down on you all the time. Imagine just spending a day of your life where you never get to your full height. If you ever have, for whatever reason, a chance to try that, it changes your perspective on the world. It's really unfair that we look down on people with wheelchairs. But that's the case for most, if not all, disabled people. I've been knocked back so many times in my life from different sources. Something desperately needed to be done. As I say in the book, I know that I can't change the world. Even though a dream, that is what it is. A dream is to change the minds of the entire world. But if at least I change one person's perception, that's a win for me. I'd ask anybody listening to this as well, I'm speaking now for Sam on stage. If you want to come and speak to Sam afterwards, and just any question you have, anything you'd like to say, please do so at the end. It'd be very, very welcome. The book revisits many extremely difficult experiences that Samantha has faced in her life. I asked Samantha, how challenging was it to revisit these experiences? At the start, Samantha said, very. I buried so much inside me for so long that when it was time to write about the difficulties in my personal life, that itself was difficult. I often cried when I was writing everything down because I was dredging it all back up. The pain, the discrimination, etc. Samantha also noted that at the time nobody actually knew about the crime. It's something Samantha kept all to herself. So much pain kept locked up inside. As soon as I wrote everything in my mind at the time, I felt like a weight was lifted. A weight I'd been carrying around since 12, may I add, when life for me started to become negative, which just kept getting heavier and heavier as time went on. I realise now how cathartic it was getting everything out, finally, after years of inner turmoil. Yes, it was difficult in the beginning, but it needed to be done for 2 reasons. Number 1, to help me. And number 2, to show that I am what is considered normal to society. I've gone through normal things, births, deaths, issues in obtaining jobs, the normal highs and lows in life. I'm so glad I did, as I truly feel happier and more confident in myself and my abilities. Again, for me, my journey with Samantha, that we're here today, that Samantha is on this stage today, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's wonderful that I can look Samantha in the eye as an equal, and I can share her story and see the world through her eyes. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. The book highlights the experience that Samantha and other people with disabilities face on a daily basis, and in particular forces the reader to rethink how they see disability. I asked Samantha what feedback has she had from people who have read the book, and I think Samantha would agree it's been a huge amount of feedback, huge amount of positive feedback. Has it taken you by surprise? Feedback, sometimes from the most unexpected places as well. And in fact, it was amazing for me. Just the other day I spoke to a gentleman I know who told me he'd given the book to a member of his family who suffers from CP, and they said back to him that the book had transformed their life. It's an incredible, incredible thing. So in Samantha's words, overall the feedback has been very positive, which I'm glad about. People have said to me personally they've learned a lot about disability and now have a proper insight into what disabled people face day in, day out, which is amazing. And hopefully a change of attitude may be on the horizon. But like with everything, you never truly know until you see words put into action. I like to think people are now finally starting to sit up and take notice. It may be naive on my part, but if we don't have hope for a better, more equality-driven future, then what have we got? And I think, again, from me working with this book, which has been a real privilege, as I said, is it's not just about taking this book and reading it and putting it back on the shelf. This book is about taking something away, and if you can take one action from the book and change one thing that you do or think in your daily life, then that book has multiplied in power. I asked Samantha to talk about discrimination that disabled people face, and whether she thinks attitudes have improved in recent years. Samantha's answer was very direct, and I respect the fact that Samantha will tell the story as it is, because it needs to be told as it is. And in Samantha's words, it depends on what you mean by improved. The media is now trying its best to highlight disability in a more positive light than before, but in my opinion, there is still room for improvement. Disability is still being discriminated against in general society. Employers are one example. They tend not to employ disabled people as much as they employ able-bodied people, simply because they believe disabled people either cannot work or, for whatever reason, they think disabled people will ultimately leave employment due to health reasons. I've heard that the school system is more accommodating towards disability today, and that's great, but equality should have been there in the beginning, in the mainstream. At least, though, schools are starting to become aware of the discrimination and are finally trying to do something to help. But it's so important that what we do is not just a tick box exercise to say we're an inclusive school, we're a disability friendly school. It's got to be led by people like Samantha. We have to make sure people like Samantha have a voice and lead that. It's far too easy for me to say I can understand what Samantha needs, I can make provisions for Samantha, but I'm not living the life Samantha is living. So important that we engage and listen to the people who need us to make adaptations. Not adaptations for them, but just adaptations so we can all enjoy equality. Samantha said that maybe if there wasn't such a disconnect in society in the first place, maybe I wouldn't have felt the need to write the book. But everything has to start somewhere. And I'm so pleased to know that disability is now getting the respect it so desperately deserves. So yes, to go back to the question, there has been a slight improvement, but so much more can be done. I asked Samantha to expand on that point and tell me, as an able-bodied person, what still needs to happen. What do we need to do to make the world a better place for those who do have different abilities to what we consider, perhaps wrongly, to be normal? I say in inverted commas. Education, first and foremost. What's Samantha's answer? Education in schools, education in workplaces, education everywhere where disability is still considered a foreign subject. If there was more education in schools, colleges, universities, workplaces, then I truly believe disability would be accepted as more part of a standard society. We need to show people that we can do things just as well, if not better, than other able-bodied people. Also though, to teach the difference of different disabilities, or perhaps we should be saying different abilities, as I do feel disability is grouped together under one umbrella as one thing, and it so definitely isn't. Each and every one of us in this room could have what we know as a disability. Everybody is different. Some are seen, some are unseen. For Samantha, using a wheelchair is a very visible, it's a badge society puts upon you that says instantly, I'm disabled. But why should it matter? When I get in my car, people don't judge me because I'm using a form of transport. We have to change the way we perceive things. Disability means a lot of things to different people, and only by educating others on this we can start to build a more inclusive society that really is something with equality for everyone. Now, going back earlier in the year, I actually spoke to Sam about International Women's Day, a wonderful, wonderful celebration of women's rights, and something that really does highlight the ongoing battle against discrimination. But I'm going to bring back a question I asked Samantha then, because I still feel that it has a lot of relevance today. And that question that I asked Samantha was, do you feel that women with disabilities are sufficiently represented? Samantha said you now have a number of disabled women celebrities. There's comedians such as Rosie Jones, sportswomen such as Ellie Simmons, TV presenters such as Nikki Fox, for example. And it's all refreshing and reflective of a more ethical society. But again, although I'm reluctant to keep going over the same ground, a lot more can be done in everyday life. Having disabled women at the forefront of entertainment does argue a good case for the normality of disability. But because disability isn't suitably represented as a whole, I don't think that disabled women have much impact on everyday society. Just as we had movements like Black Lives Matter and Me Too, maybe it's time we had a similar movement for disabled women to get rid of this general umbrella that we seem to live under the shadow of. The answer to that question led me onto the topic of activism. And I asked Sam the question, do you have any further plans beyond the book to continue to raise awareness on the topic of discrimination against disabled people? And I asked Sam to answer this question with the most honest and blunt answer she could. And I think that's important here. These are Sam's words. I am not making these, I'm not making this up, I'm not speaking my words. This is Sam's feeling. Sam says she appreciates being asked about the topic of activism. Samantha doesn't see herself as inspirational. It shouldn't be inspirational to fight for equality. I'm just trying to highlight the obstacles of disability, both physically and metaphorically. Now that I have written the book, I found a new determination to get better results for those with disabilities. I do personally feel I found a new purpose, and I'm currently in contact with the government to try and make them aware of the current situation for disability and see what can be done to change the idea of disability as a whole. If anybody's read the local media, Wrexham.com, very recently, you may have seen a picture of Samantha with Leslie Griffiths, the MS for Wrexham, who has taken this book to the Senedd. She invited yourself for a trip to the Senedd. We've got politicians on board recognising that even though progress has been made, there's so much more that can be done. I asked Samantha to tell me a little bit about the journey that she's had since the book came out, how people have reacted, what opportunities she's had, one of those being the example we just mentioned. And Sam, your answer was that people have been so wonderfully kind. Writing the book, I was a bit apprehensive, as I didn't hold anything back. I was worried it may be a bit too much for people to read. But the amount of positive reviews and comments I've had since the book has been published has absolutely astonished me. I guess it was the lack of confidence that I had that made me feel so uncertain. But I'm so grateful that CP Isn't Me is having such a positive impact. I've had some incredible experiences, from the Senedd shop stocking the book and being invited by the Senedd for a guided tour and to see the book on display, to the Jacksons being so kind as to help me promote the book by having a photograph taken with CP Isn't Me. They even took a copy for themselves to read, which is absolutely incredible for me, as I have always been a fan of Michael Jackson and the Jacksons. Other opportunities include today being here at the Llangollen International, Eisteddfod. There have been those who have suggested I've forgotten where I came from, and I'm not the same person as anybody who has ventured onto any stage may have encountered. Part of this, though, is true. I'm not the same person I was. I'm happier, I'm more confident, and I'm more determined than I ever was before. I really couldn't care less now about what people think of me. I'm happy, and to me, that's all that matters. My mind is a much nicer place to be. Yes, I've had some truly incredible experiences and opportunities as I've described, of which I'm truly grateful. But I have not, and I never will forget where I came from. I'm just a woman from Wrexham who is sick and tired of the same old belief that disability isn't a part of the mainstream society. And I'm doing everything I can to change this unfair belief. People can say what they want. I don't care anymore. Writing has given me a platform, and I'm definitely not going to waste it. If you do want to hurt me with your words, you're about 3 years too late. And writing is a wonderful way to articulate things that you may struggle to articulate otherwise. Not everybody's a confident speaker. But for Sam, I think I've seen you grow your voice on the page to be so, so strong. Of course, it's great that we're here now, but this is just the beginning of your journey. It's still the early days of your journey. So I wanted to ask Samantha what future plans she has as an author. Sam answered, it's still a work in progress, but I'm currently working on my second book now, which is a more generalised view of disability from the eyes of society. The next book isn't as autobiographical as CP Isn't Me. I've decided to concentrate this time on what society thinks about disability by involving them through research. And I have a few surprises in the works as well for the next book, from people who you might consider to be higher ups in society, which is extremely exciting and I'm so grateful for. I've actually had a chance to look at some of Sam's work beyond the book CP Isn't Me, and I think it's something really quite incredible. I'm really looking forward to seeing that come to fruition in the future. To sort of wrap up this part of the conversation before we invite any of you to come and have a chat with Samantha on a one-to-one basis, I asked Samantha what she would recommend for other people who have experienced discrimination. How should we deal with it? Who can help? And including those perhaps who have witnessed discrimination, perhaps those who have experienced discrimination by actually causing it, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally. I think all of us at some point in our life, in some way, have participated, whether or not deliberately, in some form of discrimination. Sam's answer was basically what I've already said in the book. People will always discriminate against disabled people. It's just human nature to pick on what they consider to be the weakest in the food chain. But the key is not to let that define you. You define you, nobody else. Whenever you feel society isn't taking you seriously, just remember who you are. You're amazing. You're strong. You're human. As long as you believe in yourself and your abilities, nothing else matters. Talking to people who you trust about your difficulties is a great place to start. Or even charities, such as Scope, but I would say for all of us here as well, is listening to people talking about that as well is equally important. It may be daunting to have those conversations at first, but the people who you truly trust only have your best intentions at heart, and they will understand more than you think. That's what I finally did, and now I'm in a much happier place in my life. A weight was lifted when I opened up, both in the book and verbally. Hold your head up high and prove to the naysayers how brilliant and, more importantly, how normal you are. By doing this, you are ultimately destroying any power a person may feel they have over you, and you become more resilient of any discrimination you may face in your life. Take it from me, if I can overcome what I've been through, believe me, so can you. I think we should give Samantha a word of applause for sharing these words and this journey with us. And once again, it's so important for me to reiterate, these are Samantha's words, not my words in this stage. I'm only here to help Samantha to share her thoughts here. I would urge anybody, if you haven't already, to get a copy of the book and read it. And I'd actually encourage you to do this as well. Rather than put it on your bookshelf and leave it on a bookshelf to collect dust, if you've read it and it's given you something, pass it on to somebody else so they can read it as well, because it's a book that is designed to bring about change, as so many books have over the ages. But books don't change the world when they're sat collecting dust on a shelf. If anybody would like now to come and ask Sam any questions directly, please do feel free to come up. Come and take my seat and come and have a little chat with Sam. You're very, very welcome to do so.
Can I just ask, where's the book available? Where can I buy a copy?
The best place to buy the book is on Amazon. If you search the book CP Isn't Me on Amazon, you'll find it there, and you can obviously get it all there.
Thank you.